No, we're doing well. I mean, it's been a really busy year. With the fundraise and now starting to grow the team, and sort of this push towards manufacturing and commercialization. It's been a really busy year, but overall doing really well. Yeah.
We like to tease that Blue Current years are like dog years, that we've lived like 5 to 7 years during the last 12 months since we saw you. We've done a lot.
Yeah. Now I can't believe how fast the time's gone, and let's start with you, Susan, because obviously it was the second week when we did the first podcast. It was like your second week in the business, so yeah, lots changed. Talk us through like your journey so far in Blue Current.
Oh my gosh, it's been quite a journey. Well, I guess I'll start kind of backwards, which is, the culmination of my first year at Blue Current, almost on the nose, was us completing our Series D capital raise. So we were targeting $75 million raise. We ended up oversubscribed and took just over $80 million. And we closed that round on September 22nd, which was almost my 1-year anniversary. I had joined on September 30th. So I had lots to celebrate in September. So that was, just an incredible amount of work for our executive team, for our board, for our investors. I cannot say enough about how involved and helpful our board and investors have been in just supporting Blue Current, opening their networks, explaining why they're so passionate about the company and technology. We really had all the help we could possibly get, and it worked. So we're really proud of that. And we're very, very proud of our team. I think, one of the hard things about raising money is it is just almost by definition distracting for the executive team. You have to be out talking to investors. You have to be telling the big story, and you also need the business to keep operating. And our team just did a beautiful job of not just operating through that and continuing on our progress, but accelerating. Really accelerating across the board. R&D. Cell engineering, which is like our cell scale-up analytics and testing team, and then our manufacturing team. Everybody was hitting on all cylinders. It was really amazing. So that's kind of the overlay, and then I promise I'll stop talking in a second because I want Kevin to talk a little bit about what's changed on the technology side. But we've also really, from a market standpoint, we've evolved, I think, alongside the rest of the market here. I think people are talking about an EV winter. I think it's really just part of the typical hype cycle. There's still a lot of demand for EVs. I drive an EV. I love it. So we're certainly not going to abandon that market. But the more and more that we start to test our battery cells with thought to application more than just quantifying what the cell can do, and really testing against operating conditions for different applications, we're finding some just really interesting applications for our NMC battery cell.
Nice. There's so much to unpack there. Obviously, talk about the EV winter, and we'll get into a little bit later about kind of what this now means and kind of what the plan is to scale. But just an observation first of all, Susan. Obviously, when you started, when we did the podcast recording over a year ago, there wasn't really much you could say at that point. It's amazing how much you can now say and thought through. So it's a learning process for everyone. But no, it's really good to see, and I was actually going to refer to you on this one, Kevin, because it's your 8-year anniversary this month, isn't it? You've been with Blue Current for a long time, and you've enjoyed a lot of different chapters with the business. Does this one feel different?
Yeah, 100%. Every chapter is different. The market is different now. I think when I started here in 2018, everything was kind of pointing upwards. It was really high potential. Everybody was excited about the future. 2020 through 2022 was kind of like this boom in the industry, especially the solid state battery industry, but also just the battery startup industry, electric vehicles more generally. and now we're kind of in sort of this market where things are maybe have pointed in the other direction for some period of time, and but simultaneously what's happened is that there are other emerging markets that they're going to have enormous demand for batteries, and the world is just continuing to electrify. So internally, I would say we went from being truly an R&D company to being a company that was R&D, but also starting to spec equipment and get equipment installed and starting to sort of do some of the preliminary scale up and manufacturing work. Now the company is very focused on commercialization and manufacturing. And so that's sort of the new chapter, and you grow the business, you add new people, and so every chapter has been exciting. I remain extremely excited about the technology and everything going on here, and it's just I appreciate you checking that it's been 8 years. You must have looked at my LinkedIn or something, but it's been an awesome journey. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I did check your LinkedIn profile before. I knew you've been there for a long time, so I just wanted to reference exactly how long. And you can be honest, Kevin, how much of a difference has Susan made since she joined the business?
I'm sitting with him. That's a trick question.
Yeah, no.
Maybe you can't be honest.
Well, I think that you can just kind of listen back to what Susan just said and remind yourself that all of this has happened effectively within a year and a few months of Susan joining the company, which is really sort of a testament to how fast she was able to jump in. And Susan and I have very complementary approaches to work. Also personalities. We've taken some sort of personality tests and whatnot, and it turns out we're very complementary. So. What we had to do over the past year and a half to fundraise, prepare the company for the next chapter, prepare the company for more growth. Susan has led a lot of that, and she did so while also jumping in really, really quickly. It was within a few months that we started the fundraising process after Susan joined. So to say that she's made a difference would really be an understatement.
Thanks.
And she's made a huge difference.
You can tell we like working together. We're a team that's having fun, which one of my prior life, one of my investors who had been incredibly successful in life and in business, that was his favorite question to ask management teams, as he said that was always the best gauge, whether they were raising money or operating, just, are you having fun? And if the answer was yes, he always took that as a very good sign. And we are having fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Well, that's it's interesting. We'll get into kind of the importance of the team and kind of what is the most important things when it comes to scaling and building a business like you guys are. But something I wasn't actually going to talk about today was the kind of contrast of personalities in leadership teams. You mentioned that you two have kind of different personalities which complement each other. Like if you have a leadership team that all think the same and kind of maybe agree on things straight away, obviously you can get to point B quicker, but maybe you could have got to point C, point D instead because of that kind of critical thinking and kind of argument. So, no, good to hear. Good to hear it's going well and you're having fun, at least on the podcast whilst you're in the same room together. But just on the investment landscape, first of all, Susan, obviously you've got a rich history in the investment landscape and gone through raises before. What's your impression of the investment landscape right now in the US and particularly our industry?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think, incredibly dynamic right now. And I guess I would choose between the words dynamic and volatile, but I think dynamic is probably the right word. I think we, just as an industry, really lived through a time where capital was really, really challenging to come by. We had the, and I'll do my hype cycle, visual again. Like we had just 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had a ton of capital pouring into batteries, and particularly solid state technologies, which are just, I think, deep tech takes time. And so I think, as expected, a lot of money went in, and results have just been naturally a little slower. So the capital was pretty tough to come by here for a little while. I think now we have, despite the EV winter trend that I mentioned, I think we have a lot of renewed interest in batteries for other applications. I think we had stars in our eyes about how big the EV battery market was going to be, and we still believe it is going to be. And all of these other really transformational use cases have emerged and have gotten weight for batteries. And in particular, we sit here in the U.S., and here in the U.S., there's just an incredible focus on energy for data centers, and batteries for grid stability. And that is there's similar products, they use similar batteries, and it's not just a gigantic market, but it is an imperative for national security, for helping keep household electricity bills down. There are just a lot of vectors that make batteries for that market an imperative. So that's a really long way of me saying capital is interested again, and so I think it's a good and exciting time, but we're still at the beginning. And I think one of the big challenges of raising money in the battery industry is it is incredibly technical. Even experts in the industry struggle to differentiate between different battery chemistries, because unless you live in it, it's very, very challenging to figure out what's important and what questions to ask. So it's an interesting intersection of investors have to be incredibly technical, and just have to be really kind of ruthless in thinking through what matters to them when they're looking at deep tech battery companies. Kevin's nodding his head because he gets a lot of questions about alternate battery chemistries.
Yeah, and it is very complex, like Susan said, and a lot of times you'll see data where you're looking at fast charge data, for example, but you're not seeing what the cycle life for that same exact cell is, or how fast charge impacts cycle life, and whether or not the cell chemistry can withstand the fast charge process. And that's just one example. The point is, you have to be looking at several different key metrics all at once. It's just inherently complex, and I think just sort of accepting that as part of the due diligence process is absolutely critical. And it's just it's naturally complex, but just to sort of reiterate Susan's point, it's just, I think in this investment environment, you have to be absolutely clear with your data and what you're showing, and also a little more advanced in terms of what markets you're going after and how your self-performance data sort of meets the requirements of those markets. And I think that given how the investment community's been over the past couple of years, it's you have to have that level of sophistication and clarity in your go-to-market strategy. So, yeah.
We obviously mentioned the EV winter, but there's other application areas. I don't think the EV market's going to go away. It's just maybe less, it's a less attractive industry to invest in right now. In terms of your chemistry, there's been a lot of argument around solid state. You're not just tackling solid state, you're tackling silicon anode as well. So two kind of novel technologies. How much do you believe in this technology now? And then also, second part of the question is, what other application areas are you looking at, and where do you really see the focus over the next few years?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, I think starting with the materials and solid state generally, we fully believe in this approach, and in terms of what the challenges of solid state are and what the challenges of silicon are. In a way, combining the two approaches sort of solves both sets of challenges. Silicon cycling in a liquid electrolyte environment has challenges, right? We know silicon expands and contracts. It can react with liquids. That can cause rapid capacity fade. If you put silicon into a fully dry electrolyte, you can resolve a lot of those issues. hand in hand with that, solid state has sort of meant lithium metal in the past, and lithium metal is a challenging anode material to get to work. With dendrite formation and how that can limit things like fast charge and long-term durability and cycle life. So again, using a different active material instead of what's traditionally been focused on lithium metal can resolve some of those issues. So in a lot of ways, pairing the two things together can solve the issues that both have traditionally faced. It's not without its challenges, and that's where we've focused a lot of our development time. Finding the right silicon active materials that can cycle in a fully dry anode and developing the electrolyte materials that allow it to expand and contract while maintaining adhesion and contact. That has been really the focus of a lot of our research over the past 7 or 8 years. But ultimately, like our approach, we feel is very practical and in terms of scalability. The anode is, right now we use slurry mixing processes to make the anode, the separator, and the cathode. Long term, there's the potential for something like a dry manufacturing process, but these are pretty much off-the-shelf tools that we use to make the anode, and same thing with the separator. So there is this advantage of it being very, very similar in nature to how lithium-ion cells are made today. And the hope is that by having a composite anode, it'll just simplify the manufacturing and scale-up effort. Second part of the question was, what about markets and how things sort of changed with time? And I would start by saying that lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles, or batteries more generally, EV is an extremely hard application for everybody. You have to do everything. It has to be low cost. It has to have long cycle life. It has to be energy dense. Your batteries have to be able to fast charge. It has to have good calendar life. It has to be manufacturable in really high volumes. So you have to check off every single box. And what that means, though, is if you can check those boxes off, you start to open up some other applications. And we've been developing a cell with a silicon-based anode and NMC cathode, and we've been getting interest in those cells for some adjacent markets. They, quite frankly, probably have a shorter path to entry, but have similar requirements, if not a step back in some ways. And a lot of our strategy around go-to-market is now targeting some of those applications first, so that eventually going to EVs in the long term will be easier. So there are applications like micromobility and robotics that they have similar demands as an electric vehicle cell, but the path to entry is a little bit faster. The other thing that's been exciting for us over the past couple of years has been the emergence of stationary batteries. I shouldn't say the emergence because it's been there for a while, but it's really just been taking off over the past couple of years. We've had interest in this space for, I would say a while now, but we've been really gearing our technology towards that stationary storage market much more intensely over the past year or so. The thinking there is effectively that when you have solid state materials, when you have dry interfaces between active materials and solid electrolytes, you can have really remarkable stability between the materials. And the evidence of that for us is when we take high silicon content active materials and anodes and demonstrate really, really great cycle life in a dry cell, right? So there's evidence of this. Stationary storage, they want long cycle life. They want a battery that's going to be stable. They're buying an expensive asset, and they expect it to last a really long time. So fundamentally, when you think about what solid state can offer to that space, it's essentially a new paradigm in how you can stabilize these active materials for really, really long cycle life. So we've become really interested in that area, and even with our NMC-based cell, some of our more recent formulations are trajecting to beyond 1,500 cycles with over 80% capacity retention. the economics of that start to become really interesting for stationary storage. And on top of that, right, it's not just cycle life, but you also have high energy density, which matters to some of these companies. And so that's been a newer focus for the team, and ultimately developing a fully dry solid state cell with a composite anode. We think is a really interesting point of focus for stationary applications. It's one that we're pouring a lot of our time and R&D efforts into right now. So, I think I answered both questions.
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah, perfect, but very interesting because, it's maybe not an obvious choice to look at solid state silicon for stationary applications. So actually, the argument that it would be the perfect solution, and I agree that kind of area has been, kind of really in high demand, and it's been growing recently, and I think that will really continue to grow because the demand on the grid is just becoming crazy, especially with the demand from AI and data centers. These things need to be powered. So, very interesting. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. I was thinking more mobile applications, but no, thank you for sharing. A key theme of this new podcast, which this is the first episode of, thank you for being the debut guests, is going to be about scaling and building businesses, which is why I was really keen to get you two back on the show to talk about the build now of Bluecurrent. And the reason I want to do it on this theme is because I still see a skill gap or an experience gap when it comes to truly scaling businesses in this industry, particularly in the USA. So I guess, first of all, would you agree with that? And if so, why do we think that there is still that experience gap in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first, and then I'm curious
Sure.
if Kevin agrees. I think, I think there are a lot of very smart, very experienced teams in the U.S. that are scaling batteries. So, I do want to acknowledge that we've got a lot of really smart people working on this problem. I think, and this is a personal hypothesis, so take it for what it is. I think that because batteries are so technical and because they take a long time to develop from lab to commercial scale, I think that means that you end up with a very an employee and leadership population that is just kind of tends to have grown up through the technical side of the business, because those are the folks that have the staying power with technology that needs to be developed in the lab. So, is there an experience gap? I can't really answer that question, but I can tell you that we are really anxious to find partners that we can work with here in the U.S. to scale into manufacturing and into some of our commercialization activities in the U.S. And I think we have more well-developed ecosystems, certainly in Asia, a little bit ahead of us, I think, in Europe. So we're looking to build those ecosystems. So I think about it less as an experience gap within the industry and more of an ecosystem gap. And I think, there are a lot of folks, government, non-government, private capital, who are working on that problem, because I think, a lot of people kind of woke up one day, not all on the same day, but all woke up and decided that we really need to start figuring out how to make things like batteries here in the U.S. With U.S. supply chain.
That's
what do you think?
Interesting.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that sort of like the three stages of productization, right? There's the design, then there's the manufacturing, and then there's the marketing. And I think that the U.S. is very strong at design and marketing, and depending on the industry, right? We're also great at manufacturing, but we've been a little slow to catch up in regards to battery manufacturing. So the challenge for batteries is like the design goes hand in hand with manufacturing. The materials have direct implications for what tools you use to manufacture, and so they have to go hand in hand. And the term that Susan used in terms of there being an ecosystem gap, I think I love that, because I feel like there is sort of this like piece in the middle of manufacturing that we just need more of in the United States. And So yeah, I think that as we build out more and more manufacturing capacity, there will just inherently be more manufacturing talent. And uh, I will say one of the things I've seen even over the past 7 or 8 years, there is a lot of talent here. I have a lot of friends that have been in the battery industry that have done some level of manufacturing themselves. Compared to where we were in 2018, there is a lot of expertise out there, and that's been really cool to watch. Just how much growth there's been in the talent pool over the past several years, and even just in the Bay Area. I have friends that have worked at different battery companies, and people have gotten really deep in battery science and manufacturing. So it's definitely growing. Like, it's going in an upward direction, and I think as we scale more, there will be more talent out there. So,
yeah. An ecosystem gap, Susan. I like that. I'm gonna trademark that one.
But have it. All yours.
There's been so much growth, and still we're in our infancy, and this is why I think this kind of stance on the podcast series is important, because hopefully there's going to be other founders out there who are growing and take tips and ideas and experiences from others to ultimately all achieve together, because we all need to achieve together to be able to electrify the future. So very good.
And Jamie, I'm gonna jump in, because I heard, this is slightly off track, but I heard Kevin say two things that I think are really important here, and he said it in two different answers. But you may have heard him earlier in the conversation use the word practical a couple times, in relation to our technology stack. And then you just heard him talking about design for manufacture, which I think Kevin can tell you that comes in large part from where he started his career at Ford Motor Company, and really, truly learning to design for manufacture. But those things, that sensibility of not just can we do cool things in the lab, but truly from end to end, deep in our R&D organization, even when we're doing incoming materials selection, everything is with a focus on scaling into manufacturing and making sure that we are, from first principles, designing cells that can be manufactured and can be manufactured using as much of an existing process and equipment set as possible. And that, I don't know that is necessarily unique, but it's certainly special about what we do at Blue Current, and I think is critical to success and to your point, to scaling and commercializing.
That feeds us perfectly into the next section, which is the plan now. So kind of after this Series D extension and obviously the kind of addition of you, Susan, what's the plan now for Blue Current over the next few years in terms of how you're going to build the business?
We're going to go as fast as we can. I mean, really, I think, that's kind of the theme. And, in some ways I like to say, and this is maybe not that interesting to anyone else, but back in my deep history, I trained as an EMT at one point, and one of the things that really stuck with me from that is this concept of go slow to go fast, and really meaning if you want to do something quickly, invest time on the front end to really figure out what path you need to be on and kind of work out the details. In the EMT world, that's more about make sure you assess your patient and make sure you understand what's going on with them before you start treating. But here, I think that's really another theme for us. So today we're in, I would say, we're moving as quickly as we can, but we're also in a relatively deep planning phase. We have, because our technology is so well developed, we're starting to make it on our pilot line, which is really exciting. Really that shift from R&D onto pilot manufacturing is a huge step for us, and so that's very exciting. And that to us is such an incredible proof point. So what does that mean for us? It means we need to start going more quickly across every vector. So Kevin mentioned commercialization. That is a huge effort for us right now, really working through, for the handful of applications that are right in front of us, what do we need to deliver to be successful for our customer? And I got to tell you, we don't think it's just cells. And that's been a shift from kind of that like EV thinking. Customers in the EV world have really well developed pack engineering teams and tech scouts who know exactly what to do if they get, a sample 2 amp hour solid state battery. They know what to do with it. That's not the case for every application. So we're working through with our team, cell to module to pack to even to system. How far do we need to go? How much do we need to help our customer take advantage of the batteries that we have developed? So that's a big activity for us right now. We've brought in, of course, we're growing the team. So we've brought in talent to help us, and we continue to bring in talent to help us do that. And I would say the other, really big vector, and this one I'll turn over to Kevin to talk about, is manufacturing strategy. And, kind of what is the quickest but least, de-risked way to walk our way from pilot manufacturing to scaled manufacturing. And I mean volume, I mean form factor. Again, we need to scale across multiple vectors and get our batteries into the market. So Kevin's been evolving with the technology, and manufacturing strategy is now something that he spends quite a bit of his time thinking about.
Yep. Yeah, I'll just add there, it's, how do I say this? I think that we remain ultimately somewhat flexible in how we go to market. What we have to do right now is very clear. Like we have to scale batteries on our pilot line here, get those into the hands of customers, start to do evaluation testing for productization, and then take the results of that and those relationships, and then take things a step further, which would be most likely a second manufacturing facility with a larger manufacturing volume. The nameplate capacity of the facility here is about 1 megawatt hour of annual cell production capacity. That's the nameplate capacity, right? So there will have to be another step after this, and we've discussed in the past the licensing approach for the technology. We continue to remain interested in that. We're also cognitive of the fact that there's complexity with that when you're licensing not just a material set, but also a process that goes hand in hand with that can sometimes be pretty rich in things like trade secrets. There's a lot of complexity to that. We also remain interested in manufacturing of cells as a business model. So all of that will be tied to go-to-market strategy in regards to which applications and products we're actually targeting with our cells. And so we're going through a pretty intense analysis right now about which of those products and applications we're going to go after most intensely first, and then what will be second, and then what will be third. So that's going to be a really interesting part of our story, I would say, over the next year. I think that what we have to do at this facility is very clear. We have to scale the technology and get cells into the hands of customers, and then what will come after that, I think will just be easier to achieve once we have success here. So.
Exciting. It's going to be an interesting journey ahead. Obviously, this is obviously a key chapter, and I feel we're kind of on the brink of something quite exciting here, particularly for solid state technology. So, good luck for this next chapter. We've been talking about talent and people, just more of like a slightly different question. What is your favorite trait that you look for in people when it comes to joining the team? And do you have any non-negotiables?
It's a great question.
Well, I would think we'll probably have different answers because Kevin hires slightly more technical talent than I do.
Sure.
Yeah, for me, the trait that I'm always looking for is curiosity. Truly, I think that is that is the number one indicator of success in startups. I happen to think it's the number one indicator of success in life, but for hiring, just curiosity. I think that tells you so much about a person. So that's something that I'm always looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
It's so hard to boil down to one. So let me cheat and give you, I would say, three that are
Go for
it. we've talked with the leadership team and some of our investors about finding people that are contribution oriented and just people that are inherently looking to make an impact towards some sort of shared purpose within the company. So being contribution oriented, I think, is absolutely critical. The second is, we talk about the complexity of what we're doing. We're making an anode, a separator, and a cathode, and the manufacturing processes that go with that. We're also scaling those manufacturing processes. Every single material and process impacts another material or process within the cell in the manufacturing process. So every component is going to have some sort of impact on another component. And what that means is that as an organization, you have to recognize that and develop a team that will work together and sort of be able to cross those interfaces and understand like how what you're working on independently is going to impact someone else. So collaboration is another one. You have to have people that are going to work with others and be proactive in how they do that. And then third, being the technical person, technical excellence is absolutely key. Like we want to build an amazing technical team and find people that are striving to be, the experts in the field. And so contribution, collaboration, and technical excellence, I think those three things together are an important fabric.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know about non-negotiables. I think I'm just looking at Kevin to see if we think we have any I think that just filtering for the things that we both said, kind of is more of a positive filter and, kind of gets us in the room with the type of people who are good fits for what we're doing here at Blue Current. And you kind of heard it embedded in what Kevin had to say. We are a team of systems thinkers, right? Batteries are very interdependent systems, and so are human organizations. So we're just a team of systems thinkers. So maybe that's an inherent non-negotiable, is that you have to be a systems thinker to really be a big contributor here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A systems thinker. Well, we're on to my final question, which I'm going to. I guess the plan is to ask each guest this at the end, and it's for any leaders building a business, particularly in our industry. What's the number one thing you shouldn't do, and then generally, what advice would you have for anybody in this position?
That's a great question.
That is, I know we're both like, huh?
You should.
One thing you shouldn't do.
Who would like to go first?
You have to be a good steward of the funds that have been put into the company, and you have to be very respectful and thoughtful and purposeful in how that is being spent. And maybe I'm speaking more for startup companies where you're fundraising and you're not at the point where you're just surviving on your revenue, right? You have to be really good stewards, and that means so many different things. It means being thoughtful in how you're spending. It means planning. It means being really, really calculated and how you're going to be spending and who you're going to be hiring and when you're going to be hiring them. So you can't be careless, to put it right in your terms, Jamie. You have to be really thoughtful about how you spend your time and your resources. So that would be mine in terms of just what you can't do. You can't be careless with your funding.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think 100% to what Kevin said. I mean, I think one of the biggest compliments that a management team can get from a board and investors is that you're good stewards of investor capital. And I think I do have a different answer, by the way. I'm just glomming onto Kevin's, but I think that goes in both directions. I think frequently when management teams hear be a good steward of capital, they hear don't spend too much money. And that is not what investors mean, right? When investors invest in a startup like Blue Current, they want us to win. They want us to use their money to make them more money. I mean, truly, right? And by being too precious, you can go the wrong direction. So it really is, exactly what Kevin said, finding that balance point of where to spend to create value, but not to be careless. So it really is truly about being very, very intentional about how we use that capital. I think, my answer to that question of what not to do is a little bit different, even though his was great. I think, it's really don't be rigid. And I think, especially in deep tech industries like batteries, where things take time and, time has to elapse, I think there's risk in becoming locked into your overall strategy and your day-to-day tactics. And I think being flexible, having an eye on the outside world, how is the market changing around you? What new information is coming from inside the organization and outside the organization that informs your strategy? And I think, being able to take that information and use it to continue to evolve a company's strategy, especially at this stage when you're commercializing, I think is critical. Because if you're locked into your strategy and can't adapt, you're taking a pretty big bet, especially when data, outside data might be telling you that might not be the best strategy anymore. I think that's the biggest risk, is just, getting locked in and kind of getting blinders on.
Nice. Good contrasting answers. And I guess that's kind of referring to what you said before, Susan, about starting slow so you can go fast. So obviously doing kind of all that groundwork, and then you can go fast, but ultimately don't be rigid. You still need to be agile and kind of change with the times as well. So no, thank you both very much for being the debut guests and for joining me. A big congratulations, of course, on the Series D, and good luck for this next chapter. I wish you all the best, and hopefully on the next one we're going to be talking about even bigger things.
I'm sure we will. And thanks, Jamie. We're so honored to be your first guests on your new channel.
Appreciate it, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you.